Hi everybody, it's great to be back here again. Eat some of this week's portion. Let us begin. Parashat Shoftim opens up with Shoftim b'shotrim teitein lecha. You shall appoint for yourself judges and offices, b'chol sharech, in all your cities. Literally means your gates, but of course it refers to cities. Asher Hashem Elokecha noten lecha, which God gives you, lishvatecha, for your tribes. V'shaftu et ha'am, and they will judge the nation, mishpat tzedek, a righteous, fair judgment. And then it goes on to verse number 19, lo tatem mishpat, which means you shall not pervert justice. Lo takir panim, which means you shall not show partiality in the law, right? Why is all this? Lo tikach shochad, you will not take bribery, because ki shochad yaver einei chachamim, because bribery blinds the eyes of the wise, v'yisalef divrei tzadikim, and it distorts the claims of the righteous. These are the opening verses of this week's portion. The next verse talks about tzedek. Tzedek tadov, you must chase after doing good, of righteousness. Leman techiyah, that you shall live and inherit the land which God gives you. These are the opening three verses of this week's portion. The question right away that we have to open our eyes to in the Torah, it's very important, and as we learn more, you'll begin to get used to a certain style that we have, of course, and how we learn Torah. But we see, right away we have to try to examine, we know that there's not one word in the Torah that is superfluous. And if we see here, we seem to have an issue with something being a little bit superfluous. We have to, of course, right away ask the question, why? What is superfluous? Look at verse number 18 again, chapter 16, number 18. What does the verse say? The latter part of the verse says, "V'shaftu et ha'am mishpat tzedek." Right? You will set up judges, that they will judge the nation with a righteous judgment. But there's a problem there. Why is there a problem there? Because the next verses describe how the judges have to do a righteous judgment. So the verse really can't be telling us alone that they will judge, righteously, because we know this law. We know that they have to judge righteously. So the Torah here has to be teaching us something else. How do we know they have to judge righteously? Look at verse 19. Look at verse 20. It says clearly that they have to follow a righteous path of judgment. So why is it saying that they will judge righteously? What does it mean? Therefore, Rashi, if you look at the greatest commentary of all time, Rav Shlomo Yitzchaki Rashi, the famous Rashi, he writes like this. Rashi says, "V'shaftu et ha'am," and they will judge the nation. Manei dayanim mumchim v'tzadikim lishpot tzedek. Rashi says it refers to the appointment of judges. So this verse here in 18 is not referring to the commandment of acting with justice, of actually judging with righteousness and fairness, but it's saying, make sure when you go ahead, the responsibility of the people of Israel to appoint judges, make sure that your judges are righteous. Now, what is the difference of those two claims? Either they acting justly, the proper way. Most people that are righteous do the proper thing, right? So the question is, what is it Rashi trying to say? And how is Rashi pushing us this explanation that's referring to the appointment of judges? You must appoint righteous judges. And of course, Rashi learns it out, as I mentioned before, from the fact that in verse number 19 and 20, it talks already about the way the judges must behave, and therefore, this is more than how they have to behave, but it's referring to appointing them, and they must be righteous judges themselves, individuals that are righteous people. And what does that really mean? So I thought of number one. It's very easy. For example, every country has a system of law. And therefore, if there are certain rules, as long as you're abiding by the rules, you can actually follow the Torah law, abide by the rules, but doesn't mean that you yourself have to be righteous, right? Theoretically, it's possible for a person to give that kind of judgment, a righteous judgment, going according to the laws that the Torah prescribes, but you yourself may not be a righteous person as a judge. And therefore, the Torah is teaching us, Rashi is stressing, you must see to it that you appoint judges that are righteous. Which is not only that they have to go out and be righteous be righteous in their actions and the way they judge, right, to do Torah law, but they themselves have to practice what they preach. They have to live a righteous life, because you can be a secular person going against the Torah, but comes to a judge, you're going by the letter of the law. It's showing something. It's giving a very strong message of that. There's something unusual, very, very different about Torah law. That you yourself, again, it's very important that your spiritual state as a judge as well. But I want to even delve even more and more delve even deeper into this issue. I want to bring down the famous Rabbeinu Nissim. He was one of the last Spanish giants of Torah, who lived in the Middle Ages, talking around the 1300s. And he has a beautiful essays. He writes, first of all, he's written many explanations on the Talmud, many essays. He's written many explanations on the Talmud, but he's also written a collection of essays called Drashot Haran, which are different essays, 11 different essays he wrote about different topics of the Torah. And one of his last essay number 11, he brings, as a matter of fact, he opens up by bringing Rashi down, this Rashi, and the question that, why did Rashi explain it this way? It's referring to the appointment of judges. And then he goes into a very, very unique explanation of his own that could also answer, why does the Torah sort of be repetitive here? Why does it say they must judge righteously when we know that? And he goes on to an amazing explanation, he talks about, I'd like to summarize that a little bit and give some of his amazing ideas. And number one, he talks about the difference. There are two kinds of systems of law that we experience, judicial systems. And the one system that the whole world recognizes very well, which is a system where every normal country of the world must have. And that's a judicial system that has to maintain law and order, which means you can be anywhere in the world, whether you are in China or in Russia or in America, United States, or anywhere in the world. Obviously, every country, in order for the citizens to get the proper attention they need, if criminals want to harm them, you need a system to deal with criminals, to keep law and order in that society. And that's really what is common to all law, and it's one of the 7 Noachide laws, that every nation in the world must have a system of law in order to manage society. Otherwise, one neighbor will actually eat the one up alive. And we even know that he brings down the Ran is that even criminals, they have certain rules and codes of law to keep a certain balance amongst the world of the criminal world. And this is because people know that they don't have rules and a system of law, things are going to go completely haywire, as we say in Hebrew, hefker. But on the other side, there's a very, very unusual side of law, which is only found amongst Jewish law. And that's the Torah, the system of the Torah. The law is very unusual. Why? First of all, laws that are involved not only in keeping the law and order in the world and amongst Israel, that they punishing criminals, but there's so many laws that are not at all connected to keeping law and order. For example, the laws of the Sabbath we have to keep, right? We have to today's sunrise until tomorrow's sunset, we have to keep our Sabbath and all the different intricate laws involving the Sabbath. Our dietary laws, the laws of agriculture, working the land, we have to give, again, to the Kohanim, the priests, and a tais we have to do. We can't plant mixed seeds together, all these different kind of laws that are involved. The laws, for example, of our holiday laws, the laws of atonement, the Day of Atonement, the New Year, all these different intricate laws that we have to do, which have nothing to do with society as far as keeping law and order, right? Obviously, it may have a tremendous good effect on society when you're following these laws, of course, but they're not meant for that, to keep law and order. On the other hand, the Torah has a huge, of course, huge amount of laws that deal with hard criminals like murderers and all the other kind of offenses that warrant capital punishment. The Torah has a huge amount of laws, but in reality, it's something very interesting. If you follow Torah law, they're extremely complex. These laws that deal with maintaining order in society are so complex that it's virtually almost impossible to enact capital punishment according to Jewish law. Dry Jewish law, it's very hard. Why? Because number one, for example, let's say you go see someone who's about to perpetrate a crime that is punishable by capital punishment. First, you have to give that person a warning. And after the two witnesses have to warn that person. They both have to see him at the same time. And then they both have to be together, the two witnesses. They can't be in two different areas. And then when the witnesses go over to the person, they have to say, listen, what you're going ahead to do now, you're not allowed to do this. And if you do this, you'll be liable for capital punishment. And the person who's perpetrating the crime, and the criminal has to say, I know that I'm not allowed to do this, but I'm doing it anyway. So it has to be very clear that he knows what he's doing and what he's doing. And after that, the witnesses themselves have to undergo huge investigation, 7 different investigations and 7 different, we call it chakirot and drishot, very complicated laws regarding, which means they can easily foul up by mistake. They may not know what this is, and they may actually, again, not be able to answer all the different questions that they're asked, and they may be afraid, and all these things can cause, again, and make it very hard for the actual court to commit someone for a capital punishment. And even after all that, the court itself has very, very difficult laws. If everyone in the court decides that they're guilty, this person is guilty of murder, for example, then he goes free, because there's no way that you can't find some righteous merit for a person. So all these very difficult, complicated laws. I'm just giving you a few of them. And therefore, we see that it's almost an impossibility to mete out death penalty in Judaism. On the other hand, the Torah demands that in every one of these cases we have to go through all the motions and do all these investigations and do all this, and learn and study. The judges and the people must be experts in these laws. But if it's really not practical, then what's it all about? And that's why if we follow this week's portion, right after discussing all the laws of the judges, what is the next topic? The laws of the kings, which is really amazing. And the laws of the kings brought down in chapter 17, beginning, I think, from verse 19. If you look over there, you will see that the Torah begins to discuss a few verses dealing with the laws of the kings. And what are these verses? And why? And first of all, the most important thing to realize is that the law and order in Jewish society, in Israel, when things are working the way they're supposed to be, is really at the hands of the king. So the king he has the ability and the license by the Torah, by God himself, to punish not according to Jewish law, which means the king's job is to keep law and order. So if he sees this person as a murderer, and the Torah sort of can't get him because of technicalities, we can't get this person capital punishment, the king can decide that these people with his special system can put these people to death, and they can punish these people and arrest them and do very severe things to individuals, although the Torah law doesn't require them. But the king has that ability to keep law and order. So, but on the other hand, the Torah stresses the fact that the king has to be an emissary of Torah. How do we know this? If you look in the verse, right away, as a matter of fact, I'll read those verses. If we go to the next chapter, it says, again, I mentioned before, chapter 17, which talks about the laws of the kings, verse number 20. I'd like to read that verse to you. What does it say? Okay. It says like this. It says, I'll start really, you can open up your Bibles and I'll start reading a few verses. So the verse number 1 says, verse number 16, Som tasim alecha melech, you shall appoint king, Asher Yivchar Hashem Elokecha bo, which God will choose, Mekerev achecha from amongst your brothers, tasim alecha melech, lo tuchal letet alecha ish nochi, you can't place a Gentile, which is not from your brothers as a king. And then it goes on to say, Rak lo yabelo susim, make sure that it doesn't have too many horses, V'lo yashiv lo am Mitzrayim, she won't bring a nation back to Egypt, etc. And then it goes on to say, in verse number 17, V'lo yabelo nashim, right, he can't have many wives. And then in verse number 18, Vayakish al kisei mamlech, when he sits on his throne, v'katav lo et mishneh Torah zot, he has to write a Torah scroll. And our rabbis learn out, mishneh means double, he has to write 2 Torah scrolls. And then it says, Vaytayimo v'karabo koy mechayav, and it has to be with him his entire life, which means the king, on one hand, has to watch his pride and arrogance. He can't collect too many horses, and he can't marry too many women. He has to be modest, obviously. And, of course, the most important thing is stress that he has to write 2 Torah scrolls. And the Torah scroll has to be with him his entire life, which means everywhere he goes, we learn it out. If he goes, for example, to war, he has to be with him the Torah scroll. If he's going to court, he has to be with him to court. If he's walking in the street, he has to be with him in the street. The Torah scroll has to be on his heart, which means although he has the power given to him by Torah law to rule differently, to punish criminals, to maintain law and order, he can't forget that the power he has and everything that he has is coming from the power of the Torah. So he's connected, on one hand, holding a Torah scroll in his heart, and has to be with him the whole time. And if this is the case, really, we see the beautiful harmony that exists in Jewish law between, on one hand, the Torah laws, and on one hand, the power of the king to maintain law and order. But the question, of course, still has not answered yet, that we must answer, is what's the necessity of Torah law if it can't, in many ways it's not practical for maintaining social order. Of course, we see the other side, dietary laws, these are very deep things. We can't understand the reasons behind everything in the Torah. But for surely all the laws that are supposed to be maintain law and order, in a lot of situations, it doesn't work without the intervention of the king. So there's something must be very, very deep behind studying and going through the ropes, because every situation of law you have to judge it according to Torah first. You have to go ahead and go through the ropes and ruling and have the ruling of the Torah law. And what doesn't work, of course, the king can right away come in and he can do what he has to intervene to maintain order. But the Torah law, of course, is above everything, and that has to be in every situation well studied, well learned, and decided what the Torah decision is in that situation. And the question is why? What is the practicality behind it all? And here's where the Rabbeinu Nisim I mentioned before, he says something very, very special. It's a very, very important concept we have to really let enter our hearts. And what does he say? He's saying that the Torah law is very, very powerful in that by studying the Torah and by going ahead and reaching a decision through Torah law, we are causing the divine abundance, what he calls the divine energy, to come down upon us. Which means the courts in Israel, when they study Torah, and when they decide, make a decision through Torah law with all the intricate complexity of Torah, they're bringing down the divine presence to rest upon us. And this we see, of course, where is the High Court of Sanhedrin? Where did they stand? They stood in the chamber of hewn stone, which was called Lishkat HaGazit, in the entrance of the temple, because the temple was a center of the divine light, of where the divine presence rested through prophecy and through divine worship. And therefore, the same way, the power of the court system is to bring down the divine light to the world and to bring us God's abundance upon the land. And that's why it's so amazing when you think about it. How rabbis teach us in the book of Sanhedrin, in the tractate of the Talmud, and when a proper judge according to Torah reasoning and law, they're partners with God in creation. Wow. Why? Because if you look at this amazing cosmos, you look at the world, it testifies to God being here. And a person who meditates on this and sees it, as the Rambam says, Maimonides, when you look outside, you look at the stars, you can really feel the divine presence coming down. You feel God's presence. And therefore, when a person judges according to the Torah the same way, through that we have the ability, even more than just feeling, to bring down the divine presence. It's like creation was all about, when God created the world, God brought down his presence to this world. And that's the whole reason of creation, to show the beauty of God's world, God's light in this world, that God reveals himself here. We spoke about it last week a little bit, in this concept. That in this world, we can connect to Hashem. Not to wait to the future worlds, but here on this earth. And this we see, of course, the same concept is mentioned other places. We can actually see it in Psalms. If you look again in Psalms, as a matter of fact, I think I brought the actual source down. Psalms 82. And if we look at the words of King David, what does King David say? King David comes along and says a song of Asaph, right? In Hebrew we say Shir Mizmor Asaph. God stands in the congregations of judges. God stands in the congregation, which means God's presence enters that congregation of judges. In the midst of the judges, he will judge. Which means when you're judging, God is with us there in that judgment. He's coming down. It's an amazing thing that it brings down that divine presence as well. I think I can add to it one more thing here. Nachmanides says something beautifully. He says in the beginning of his commentary on this opening verse, he says that something very unusual. We see here that Shoftim v'shotrim titen lecha bechol sharecha. You will set up judges in all your gates, all your cities, according to your tribes. He talks and he says this law applies only to the land of Israel. Why? Because outside the land of Israel, we don't have tribes, we don't have cities of our own. If someone has a problem, they'll go to the rabbis, they'll solve it for them. But the mitzvah, the commandment of setting up the judges in different cities is really only in the land of Israel. And now we see why, because the land of Israel is the place of prophecies, the place of the divine. And here it's so important to bring down the divine abundance, because from here the divine abundance reaches all of Israel. And from here the entire world benefits from Israel being in the land, and from bringing down the divine abundance, the energy, we can be a light to the nations, and they'll receive that energy as well. And that's why it's so important to set up the courts in the land of Israel. For 2,000 years we were in exile. We didn't have an opportunity. And now we're back. We're resetting up our land. We're building Itamar. We're building other cities of Israel. We're building the land for the purpose of, God willing, setting up God's kingdom, an everlasting kingdom in the land where his light will shine forever, and we will connect to God's abundance. Shabbat Shalom, Besorot Tovot, Yeshuot Venechamot. Have a wonderful Shabbat.